This is the Balanced Growth Show with Dr. Travis Perry, helping successful business professionals like you achieve balance in their lives.
Welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor podcast. I am your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today we have with us Tom Watts. Tom started his career on the institutional side of Wall Street as an investment banker and sell-side stock analyst. In 2009, he founded New York City-based wealth management firm Watts Capital and has grown the firm gradually over the last decade. With its growth, Watts Capital has since merged with WealthEdge, where Tom is now the director of investments. In building the business, Tom has emphasized maintaining a balance between work and personal life. In his spare time, Tom and his wife Olivia enjoy skiing, cycling, travel, and sharing time with their friends. Welcome, Tom, to the show.
Travis, thanks very much. I'm happy to be here.
We had a great time chatting in the pre-show about exactly what it is you've done over the years. So why don't you start us off by telling us how you got into Wall Street, maybe why, and what made you want to start your own firm and eventually merge with WealthEdge?
Sure. Well, I was lucky when I was in fifth grade. My parents introduced me to their stockbroker and said they would match any money I put in the market, from my allowance, et cetera. So I remember the first stock I bought was Standard Oil of California. And, I would look it up in the paper every day and see what it did. And I thought, I think it went from 60 to 100. And I said, this is a great way to make money. And it was fun. And, over the years, managed to find, lots and lots of ways to lose money, like investing in penny stocks. But it definitely took me, for a while I was thinking of becoming a doctor, but then I kept thinking, if I make enough money as a doctor, then I can do all these cool investing things. So I decided to shortcut it. But what really got me here was in 2000 when the market crashed. My parents were aging and they clearly lost a substantial portion of capital. And asked me to take over their investments as well as managing the whole financial side of their life. And clearly with them, I saw how much of an impact that could have, not just on the investment side, but on the financial planning side, the insurance side, trust and estate side. And as I was doing that while I was working as an analyst, and I started managing friends and family's money for free, but for the first time did it with discipline as opposed to my own money, which I wasn't as disciplined. And so when the market crash happened in 2008, I said, which do I want to do? Keep making 200 calls a month of voicemails of hedge fund managers, or do I want to start doing this, which is a lot more fun?
Yeah, client facing. You have that, relationship focus. There's nothing better, right? This is the place to be. Well, congrats on that. I know there's a lot to be said for what you've done. I know that one of your mantras right now, at least for the company, is to get the operations to support $1 billion, business. So we're going to be talking about how you've done scaling it and how balance comes into all this. So let's first start off with questions on balance. What is your definition of balance? Like, you maintain a great balance. You spend a lot of time doing these fun things with your wife and kids and friends. Tell us what is balance really all about?
I think for me, it doesn't mean, maybe it means working fewer hours, but that's not how I think about it. I think it's having the flexibility to do things that are important for me. So if I start, scheduling workouts with my wife, 2 nights a week, I can do that. If I have regular things, or if we want to take a trip, I can do that. Or suddenly if a friend comes up with an opportunity, I can do that. So having the ability to take it, to be flexible with my time is what means balance for me.
What's interesting about that is most advisors tell me they get into the business for 3 main reasons: freedom, flexibility, and the financial, untapped financial benefit, both for clients and for themselves. So I think you hit on something that a lot of advisors get into this business for. They come into this industry hoping they get that flexibility. But I find that sometimes too much flexibility is a bad thing, right? It's a double-edged sword where like, well, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. My schedule is so flexible. So they start down this path, or what we call the workaholic trap, and they get possibly sometimes sucked into that trap. And some can't make it ever out of it, and they become workaholics. Obviously, you really maintain that. You really try to do that. And you're also scaling and growing your business. So how have you been able to scale this business while keeping that balance without slipping into this workaholic trap?
Sure. Well, I'd say for a number of years that wasn't the case. It's sort of like a one-man band, and even as I added people, each person was a one-man band with we had a common operations platform. But starting this year, we said we were about 350 million in AUM, and this was after combining with another firm, and our goal was to get to $1 billion. So we decided to focus on exclusively is let's put the operations in place to support $1 billion business, and that's made a huge focusing on that operations side has made a huge difference.
Talk to us about that. Let's go deeper here. Mm-hmm. What have you specifically done? What has the company specifically done to make that a reality, that operations really are where they need to be so you can do other things?
I'd say it's a couple things. First of all, it was documenting each process that we wanted to do and getting a calendar. So quarter ends, here's what we do each part, here's what we do in the first week, here's what we do in the second through fifth week, here's what we do in the 6th through 12th week of the quarter. And then for each of those activities, actually having a specific process. And the second step was then getting people, assigning each of those to a person, which meant realigning people's jobs, but also getting people to stay in their lane, if you will. And so I think that both of those had huge impacts. I think that part of staying in lane is delegation. So I'd say that's the third item.
Delegation comes up every single podcast, I believe. You may catch otherwise, there may be one or two here or there, but literally comes up all the time. But I think what you talked about first is really important, like having a calendar. I always talk about an ideal calendar. What's your ideal look like on an average week? Where's your sweet spot? Where should you be working and staying in your lane? Mm-hmm. So we hear this a lot. I preach this a lot, but you're one of the few that have actually mentioned that no, we actually have a calendar and we have it specific by the week. That's phenomenal. I know some advisors have surge weeks or other quarters where they do specific activities. So how specific do you get with that calendar? How deep do you go with week by week?
Yeah, and I'd say it's more quarterly based in the sense that certainly the quarter ends. We do billing because we bill quarterly, but then we actually run a whole set of Black Diamond reports for every client based on quarterly results, and then we segment our client base based on what people get. There's a top group that gets highly customized ones. There's a second group that may have a few data points customized in their letter. And so then we focus on getting that out. And each one of those has, request to call or a meeting. And then we actually have a person who follows up with all the top tier clients. And then we also, one of our internal requirements is that we review every portfolio at least quarterly. So, and we actually have a check sheet for every client where we, have all the steps that we do go down forward so we document that that's been done. that's an example just on the client service side. I'd say second, in terms of when we do reviews with clients, there's a very, I used to just sort of print out a black diamond report and sit with a client. Now we have, prepare the, get things prepared a day in advance. We have an agenda. We have a review of financial planning matters. We have the report, and we have a list of the key questions. So we have those done a day in advance. So when we have a call with a client or sit down with them, we go through a standardized procedure with each one. But those are two examples.
I love that. That's so good. Love what you're doing there as far as like, hey, here's how we're doing this on a quarterly basis. You have a process in place or multi-processes in place. And, people know what they're doing. Everybody has a lane. Let's talk more about delegation. How does having 1 and 2 operations and, with the calendaring and documenting and assigning this to the right individual, how do those 2 things help to be able to delegate? Let's start with that.
Sure. Well, I'd say that on the bottom, we actually have two young people who are dedicated to operations. One had about 2 years experience in the industry. The other was straight out of college. And we just made a big point to get their activities documented. Here's what you do. Work with them so they knew exactly what to do. There weren't any questions. They know they do step 1, 2, 3, 4 if this happens. And they're bright people. They're good. They have each has their own personality, but they're accurate. They follow up with clients. And particularly early on, we checked their work a lot until the procedures were very consistent. And so now we can just tell them, get ready for, let's do quarterly reports. They run all the reports. Second is we actually have a client relations person. So she's the one who gets all the reports, gets them to the clients via email, and then follows up with them. And all those things. So the only thing in all of that, all I need to do is write the quarterly letter and decide where we're going to plug data in. And similarly with client review meetings, again, we can say we have a client review meeting. The junior people put most of the steps together, and then have a senior person who's really our portfolio manager who knows every client and has documented every client situation. He then reviews it and develops an agenda, and then I can sit down. It probably takes him an hour, or half an hour to an hour, and then I can sit down and just go over it ahead of time and maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes and be fully ready for a client meeting.
Well, it very, very organized. I think that is crucial to what you've told me. You've been able to keep your balance and to keep that flexibility, right? What would you say is, even with all of that, even with some great things in play, processes you've got going, which I 100% agree with, what is your biggest struggle trying to scale your business without losing that sense of balance, that flexibility, so you can keep the lifestyle you enjoy?
So I think it's always a question of, where do I spend my time? And I think it's, so I think that we've also, so I think it's a matter, again, of standardization. For the most part, we have standard portfolios. So we assign a client to our portfolio. We do a riskalyze for them, document that, put them in a portfolio. If there are variations in the portfolio, we document that. So that makes our rebalancing, if there's any cash in the account, automated. So I've spent a lot of time doing that. And then the question is, what do I focus on the investment side? And I'm trying to do projects that become permanent or repetitive, such as how do we evaluate each model portfolio and tracking performance of that, tracking the contribution of the investments, and then refining how do we report portfolio performance to clients. So a lot of the time I'm spending on projects, but then it's saying, what can I uniquely do? And so a lot of from my background, one of the areas I have is a lot of more sophisticated investments. So right now, I'm focusing on developing a library of more sophisticated investments that we can take to clients. And I think the pitfall for many advisors is, when do I get to marketing? And we can talk separately about that. And certainly one of my goals is to spend more time in that area, and that's happening gradually.
Some advisors become super productive, which you are. Like you're organized, you're productive, you have systems, and it's about utilizing your time as you were mentioning. But what keeps you from being sliding into what I call a productive workaholic? Somebody who's so productive but just keeps working. What keeps you like from saying, okay, that's it, I'm going to go home now, versus I'm going to just keep working?
Scheduling things. It's at 6:30 or 7 at night. Often gets me out of the office, but it's hard not to look at. Unfortunately, a lot of times I check my email before I go to sleep, but for me that's different than checking it multiple times. If I leave the office and check it once in the evening, see if there's anything urgent, that's a lot different than looking at it 10 times a day. So I think that's a big that's a big factor. And then on weekends again is saying, here's a period I'm not going to look at my email, and even during the day I try to compartmentalize. It's only check voicemails periodically, only check emails periodically, but particularly during vacation or evenings or weekends, set aside specific blocks of time to do any of those things, as opposed to respond, constantly, being on my phone or my laptop. So time blocking, I guess I would say.
Yeah, great. Yeah, time blocking, and you're being real with us. Sometimes you check the occasional email, but I love what you mentioned there about scheduling appointments out of the office. Like at 3 today, I'm going to the lake I'm going to meet up with my family. They've been there for half the day already. I'm going to meet up with them and go on my stand-up paddleboard and hang out and play on the beach. But, that for me gets me out of the office like I promised myself I would at 3:00 every day. Otherwise, you're like, well, I can do one more thing. Oh, I've got all these things that can add up. We're always going to have that, right? So, we have those same feelings every day. So you were going to say something.
I was going to say, certainly when I was younger, there were too many of those calls to my wife and saying, oh, honey, I'm going to be a half hour late, and then calling again and say, I haven't gotten out of the office yet, and then calling again. And I have tried to eliminate that completely and say, if I commit to being somewhere, make sure I get there and on time.
Yeah, it's amazing how we are with other people. Oh, if you make an appointment, you're going to be there for your client. Yeah. But what about an appointment for your spouse, like you mentioned, family, or yourself? I got to make it to the gym. I have an appointment with myself at the gym. For me, it's outside, go on the bike ride, whatever it is for you. That's a really great point. And I think it comes down to integrity, doesn't it? Where's our integrity? Because the more that we have those kinds of struggles and we give in, people have a difficult time trusting us, and they have a problem with our integrity, and they start to question that. Well, when are you ever going to make that change? For you, let's talk about that change. What made the difference? What made you say, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to eliminate that completely, like you mentioned, I'm going to start actually getting home on time?
That's a great question. I think part of it is switching a perspective of saying, my obligation is to get everything done to meet all the client needs and to do all this stuff. And maybe you could broaden that and say, I'm not enough, so I have to, always try to do more, versus getting to the point that says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm delivering enough to clients. And I think part of the operations that we talked about is it helps you think through, here's what I'm going to deliver to a client. Here's how I'm going to do that. And that's enough. And so as long as I do that, I don't worry about, I don't feel like there's an infinite amount to do, which I think before, when I was less focused on the operations side, a lot of times it just felt like there was an infinite amount to do. So,
yeah, I love this concept of I've done enough for today. I'm ready. Time to go home. We get to the point when, and researchers have found this, where we're just not productive anymore throughout the day. So even though we become really productive, it wanes throughout the afternoon for most of us. Our most productive time typically is early morning, and it wanes, especially if you have a big lunch, like even more sluggish. Hence the idea of like being able to have a healthy lunch, not at your desk, but away from the office, away from the area, so that you can relax. A lot of times I will go on walks around the block or something, talking to, right before this, I was with a partner. We're coming up with an event idea, and I walk around the block several times so I can get out of the office and think clearly, keep the productivity high. So there's some hacks, there's some things you can do, but even that said, like there comes a time in the afternoon where you have to be done. So I personally like the idea of putting it on the calendar, having things scheduled outside of your work life that are so enjoyable that you want to leave, you want to go and do it. And that is a very balanced approach. I appreciate that, Tom. What do you see as some of the biggest issues for other advisors who are trying to have this balanced type of growth?
I'm not sure I talk about this with enough advisors to speak authoritatively. I think that in many cases, each advisor has different ways they've developed their practice. And one of my former colleagues did an amazing job does really high client service, but does it from all over the world. I think he's visited 70 countries now. And so he will get on his laptop and talk to clients, even though he's in Nepal. He still carves out time every day to do client service, but at the same time he gets, whether he's in Morocco or Indonesia or somewhere else, he's very disciplined about his time management. And it's also interesting, he also has, he's also very scheduled, in terms of here's what I do for the clients this week. He has a great media program that is all of his media, does it several months in advance for the most part. So all of his things are released. So very, very organized. I think that I'm not sure what I could say for other clients. It's always, I think if you can be ahead of the client, so that if you can call the client before they call you, that gives, certainly gives me a lot more control over my life. So I don't have to worry that someone's going to call me and ask a question if I've already reached out to them. And I've reached out to them on a schedule, as opposed to they haven't heard from me in 4 months, so they're wondering what's happening.
Yeah, two really good points. I know advisors struggle with this as they're trying to develop different ways to do their practice. A good friend of mine, Derek Notman, who was so gracious enough to be the forward did the forward for my book, Achieving Balance. Like, he is a great example of dealing with so much stress and anxiety, and then basically figured out that he could do his business completely virtual, and eliminated so much of the stress that he was dealing with and the imbalance that he felt in his life. I was so moved by it that I wanted him to write about it for the forward. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. There are advisors who are, being really creative, being very flexible. It allows them to have that balance. So thank you. And then, getting ahead of the client, reaching out to them on a scheduled basis is really great advice for any service industry. There is one caveat to that, and that is we tend to be so service focused. Sometimes we lose the idea that we need to serve ourselves, right? And serve our family. So, keep that in mind. I love that you bring this up, that we really need to reach out, but do we have our checkups? Are we, doing proactively making time for our most important relationships, our spirituality. Those are the top three that I see on a regular basis with advisors. So thank you for letting us talk about that and plug that. Any last pieces of advice you would give to advisors to help them get to $1 billion? I know you're on the path. You're making it there. You guys are making significant progress, but if that's something you could, anything else you would share to help advisors get to a balanced growth, what else would you mention?
No, I think I think that the operations side is so important because it is a service business. But if you don't worry about that, for me, it allows me to focus on the client relationship and spend a lot more time, a lot more time doing that. Just as an example, I have one client who maybe it's interfering with life, but he actually lives a few blocks from me. And so occasionally on weekends, if I'm not away or doing something else, we'll get together with him for lunch or something on a Saturday. But that was something that wasn't even happening before. It's because I was able to spend more time with him on doing that. So I would say I've increased time I spend with clients, but that's because I spend so much less time on all of the normal activities. And so it actually makes, I can actually have meaningful relationships with them as opposed to just trying to serve them.
Love that. Great advice. Really appreciate your time, your expertise, your passion for balance and living it yourself, and letting us, move the curtain and kind of look behind the scenes of what's going on in your success. So thank you, Tom, for doing that. If advisors want to reach out and learn more about WealthEdge, what's the best way to reach out to you about that?
Sure. Certainly email me at t.watts@wealthedge.com is probably a direct approach. I'd say that's probably the easiest thing. You can always tap me through LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. We'll have both of those in the show notes. Thanks again for giving back to the industry, for being willing to make some time for us here on the Balanced Advisor podcast. We appreciate your time, Tom.
Great, Travis. Thanks very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. If you guys enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe. Give us great ratings, as literally every day I'm getting some fantastic feedback about this show. So thank you for making it great. And remember, live life on purpose.